He fell short of naming the individual who's leading the talks from the Iranian side. Tehran has completely rejected the claim and said that no direct negotiations are taking place between Tehran and Washington. Now, there are multiple reports claiming back-channel talks through mediators. In fact, Pakistan's foreign minister dialed his Egyptian counterpart as well, who then held talks with the Iran foreign minister Abbas Araghchi. Reports also say that U.S. negotiators may meet an Iranian delegation for talks in Pakistan. Qatar, which is a country that has played an important role in the previous negotiations, has meanwhile clarified that it is not part of any ongoing mediation efforts. This leaves us with what Israel would do now. Remember, Donald Trump did not clarify whether Israel is part of these negotiations. But hours after Trump's statement, he and the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu held talks over the phone. While the fine print of these discussions is not available yet, Netanyahu has said that Israel's vital interests will be safeguarded in any future agreement with Iran.
Earlier today, I spoke with our friend President Trump. President Trump believes that there is a chance to leverage the tremendous achievements of the IDF and the United States military in order to realize the war's objectives in an agreement that will safeguard our vital interests. At the same time, we continue to strike both in Iran and in Lebanon.
Iran, however, has taken a completely contradictory stance, rejecting any direct talks with the U.S. But Tehran has laid out its demands for negotiations and a potential peace agreement with America and Israel. There are 6 core demands from Iran. First up is the new legal framework governing traffic in the Strait of Hormuz and the closure of all American military bases in the region. Iran also wants guarantees against further aggression by America and Israel, the payment of reparations for damages caused during this conflict, prosecution and extradition of individuals associated with anti-Iran media in the West, and a halt to the military operations across all fronts, including against its regional allies and proxies like Hezbollah. On Monday this week, Donald Trump, remember, had announced a 5-day suspension of the strikes against Iranian energy infrastructure. But he's warned if the talks fail, strikes could resume. However, Trump remains positive on the chances of a deal. He's even claimed that there are already 15 points of agreement.
So you said there's many points of agreement with Iran right now.
Many.
What, can you give us a
many,
few of those?
like 15 points. 15 points.
Iran has said yes.
Well, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. That's number 1. That's number 1, 2, and 3. They will never have a nuclear weapon.
They've said yes to that?
They've agreed to that.
The statement has had very little impact on the ground reality, though. Waves of strikes and counter-strikes have continued across the West Asian region. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have already announced the 78th wave of retaliatory attacks. The announcement carried a message that read, and I quote, "We negotiate with enemies with impact-driven strikes." Since Trump's announcement, Israel's major cities have reported missile attacks from Iran. And apart from this, remember, the UAE's air defenses have intercepted 5 missiles and 17 drones from Iran. Bahrain, Iraq, and Kuwait have also reported missile strikes. Since Trump's announcement of the 5-day pause on Iran's energy facilities, Israel has carried out multiple attacks as well in and around Tehran. The IDF says it struck Iranian missile storage facilities and government headquarters. In fact, the IDF has carried out strikes on a total of 50 targets in northern and central Iran during the intervening night of the 23rd and 24th of March. Earlier in the day, Israeli forces claimed to have attacked Iran's missile and drone production sites as well. The IRGC, meanwhile, is operating under the Mosaic defense strategy. Mojtaba Khamenei remains the ultimate authority within Iran, and by authority, talks must carry his approval. Which brings us to the new Iranian leader's involvement and questions raised by Iran's adversaries. In the past, remember, America and Israel have raised doubts on Khamenei's health and whereabouts. However, Israeli media is now claiming that Mojtaba Khamenei has agreed to negotiate with America. So far, all 3 sides seem to be pulling different strings on the battlefield as well as the diplomatic corridors, and questions over the end of this war still loom large. Let me now welcome Ben Aris, who's founder and editor-in-chief of the BNE Intel News and also the former Moscow bureau chief for the Daily Telegraph. He's joining us live from Berlin at the moment. Ben, good evening. I want to start by understanding what you think of these latest, to and fro that has been happening. And amid all of this, Lebanon has now become the latest West Asian country to expel the Israeli envoy. This is after Saudi Arabia and the UAE have done so earlier. Which is now raising the question whether Gulf countries will join this war directly, or will there be an off-ramp in these 5 working days of the pause that Donald Trump has announced?
I think everyone's starting to get a bit desperate. The war's been going on now for into 3 weeks, and it's escalating. The damage is getting worse as we go on, and we switched from a simple disruption of oil flows to the destruction of processing facilities. The South Pass attack by Iran took some 17% of Qatari's production offline for years, and no one wants to go that. So on the one hand, I think the Gulf states, they need to see this end, and they're actually starting to get more proactively involved, to the point where there was a meeting in Riyadh, and there's been a lot of talk flying around backwards and forwards between them, between foreign ministers calling each other, and now the possibility has risen that the Arab countries will actually form some sort of coalition and intervene directly, possibly even militarily. At the same time, Trump is getting desperate because he thought that he could reopen the straits with his flotilla, his armada, by sailing through with escorts to the Straits of Hormuz. That hasn't happened, and it's not going to happen. They're sending troops towards the Gulf now, some 5,000 Marines plus another 4,000 from America. That's not going to work either. If they land, they will be massacred by drones and missiles. And so they're pushing hard. There's been reports that Witkoff, the special envoy, has been peppering Tehran with pleas to start talks. And I think everything came to a head with Trump's 48-hour deadline 2 days ago, saying that he would destroy Iran's power sector. And I think that's actually provoked some sort of response from the Iranian side, because that would be devastating. And so it seems that there are some talks, but the final thing I'll say on that is the two sides are so far apart, and the Iranians don't trust the Americans as far as they can throw them. So the chances of real talks actually quickly bringing an end to this are slim at best.
So Ben, while this entire conflict now shifts to the diplomatic table, militarily on the ground, nothing much has changed. There are strikes and counter-strikes still going on, barring on the energy infrastructure that the U.S. president has, paused. And the shift is also now on Israel, on whether Prime Minister Netanyahu, sees this as an off-ramp, moves toward an off-ramp, or he still wants to continue striking Iran.
Well, 2 things here. I wouldn't say it's shifted to the negotiation table. What we have is now first contact, and it's all going through the mediators. And countries like Turkey, Oman, Saudi Arabia have all got very involved because they all have a very strong interest in seeing this end. And they do have good contacts with the Iranian foreign minister, who has actually, negotiated 3 deals with the states, only to see the states renege on them, which is why the Tehran is so mistrustful of anything that the White House says. As for Israel, everyone agrees actually Israel is a problem because the strategic goals here are very different between the White House and Tel Aviv. In so much as the White House wants to strategically control the Straits of Hormuz, but is willing to do some sort of deal to get its goal precluding Iran from ever getting a nuclear weapon. But Netanyahu's agenda here, I think, is much more extreme. He would like to collapse the Iranian economy entirely and leave it sort of broken wreck so that it can never threaten Israel again. And there have been public rows between the White House and Netanyahu, who's going in extremely strong with very destructive attacks on oil and gas production facilities. And the White House don't want to see that and have publicly rebuked Israel. And the Arabs, too, also don't trust the Israelis. The Israelis are going to have to be pressured somehow by Trump in order to rein this in and stop. And it doesn't seem that Netanyahu is very interested in that.
Quickly, Ben, my last question, even as this entire statement and counter-statement continues between US and Iran, one name that is popping up in a lot of speculation is of J.D. Vance's. He's been quite, lying low about this attack, and many say that he was not in favor of these attacks. Now his name is popping up, saying that he perhaps will lead the American side into these negotiations if and when they happen. It's interesting because perhaps the Republicans and Donald Trump are also eyeing the upcoming midterm elections, and they understand that the MAGA voter base has been divided on the Iran aggression by America.
Well, that's another thing. Midterms are key. I mean, that's why Trump has painted himself into a corner here, because he can't go into those elections in November in the middle of another huge forever war. He promised, he sells himself as a peacemaker who's worthy of a Nobel Prize. With all the diplomatic to and fro going on, there's a suggestion that there would be later this week a meeting in Islamabad between Vance and, on the other side, another name that's popping up is Ghalibaf, who's the Speaker of the Parliament. And we haven't seen Khatami Jr. at all. There's lots of speculation that he was hit in the strike and he's in hospital. And of his 3 statements, they've all been written and read out on TV. And Ghalibaf is emerging as a key power broker. I mean, he's normally the Speaker of the Parliament's not that powerful, but he's incredibly well connected. He's a sort of eminence grise there. And they're trying to get him to go to Islamabad. So if this meeting between Vance and Ghalibaf comes about, then that would be moving on to the negotiation table. That would be a serious conversation that could produce some sort of results. But so far, Ghalibaf has said it's fake news, that there's no talks going on.
Yes.
No indication from Tehran's side they have any interest in sitting at the table with Vance.
All right, I'll leave it there. Ben Aris, thanks very much for joining us on WION and sharing your perspective.
Pleasure.
All right, let's get you other updates from America. ICE agents are back in the headlines for their latest deployment across American airports. ICE agents are being deployed to assist during a time, remember, when airport security officials are not being paid due to partial government shutdown. TSA employees and other officials have slammed the administration for not paying airport security agency, but pumping in funds for ICE and deploying them instead.
On a personal level, I don't think we need them here. We need to be paid. Why would you bring another agency to be TSA when you already have TSA?
I would like for them to fund TSA. I mean, that's what TSA is here for. They're here to be security. They're here to protect the people who are traveling. We don't need ICE agents to be doing that. We need for the administration to stop giving money to ICE and start giving it to the government entities who really need it.
ICE agents across airports have been seen without their masks, which the immigration officials have worn in previous instances, especially during the violent crackdown and clashes with anti-ICE protesters. Democrats have also slammed the Trump administration for this move. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said that ICE agents are not trained for airport security protocols.
Everywhere ICE goes, trouble follows. We've seen that. And it is highly likely the airports will be no exception. No one trusts that ICE is going to make things better. Patrolling airports is not in ICE's job description. It's certainly not what they're trained to do. And let's be clear, ICE agents performing the work of TSA officers are not going to make our airports any safer. It's going to make them less safe because ICE agents aren't trained in airport security.
White House Immigration Czar Tom Homan earlier had said that ICE has been deployed at 14 airports, including those in New York, Chicago, Atlanta, and Houston. Authorities said the agents would provide crowd control. However, Donald Trump said that ICE agents could also make arrests. The statement has triggered criticism and raised concerns over a repeat of the past incidents where ICE officials had killed 2 American citizens. Travelers are worried that similar tensions might play out at the airports as well. Let me go across to our correspondent Susan Teherani joining us live on the broadcast from New York to help us get an understanding of the latest. Susan, once again, ICE is in the headlines, it's in news, and people are concerned about why and for what reason ICE has been deployed at multiple airports in the United States. Take us through the latest sentiment and, of course, the reasoning behind the Trump administration deploying them at airports.
So, because the Democrats are pushing to not fund the TSA and this partial shutdown on the Homeland Security at a very critical time, and because of the overcrowding at airports and long lines of TSA, and understandably a lot of TSA workers not going to work and many of them resigning, the administration decided to deploy ICE agents to help smooth out the lines, carry out the lines, while the TSA agents that are present are focused on TSA activity and surveillance. So these ICE agents are not doing the TSA's work. What they're doing is just helping move the lines and create some kind of order. And we've seen in those 14 airports that lines are moving quicker right now. But now President Trump says because there aren't enough ICE agents to be at airports and do ICE's work, and ICE is being funded, by the way. He's thinking of also deploying National Guards just as sort of a supplementary to the TSAs at these airports, so the workload won't be so much on those TSA agents, which frankly, there's just not enough of them. That's why we're seeing just hours and hours of long lines at airports. So he's considering that as well. So the sentiment among Democrats is they're concerned that there's going to be some kind of skirmish between people and ICE. But what we've seen at airports, because protesters aren't allowed to, blow whistles in their faces and protest at airports, things are, at least for now, moving smoothly. But nonetheless, the issue of ICE, as you mentioned, has become a focal point in this sort of back and forth between lawmakers, and it's the TSA agents and ordinary Americans who are really seeing the brunt of this.
All right, Susan Tehrani, thanks very much for joining us at the moment. All right, with that, it's time for a short break. On the other side of the break, we get you more about Donald Trump's Save America Act. Beyond America's war with Iran and the West Asia crisis, there are other issues that the U.S. president is fronting at home. And one of them is Trump's proposed Save America Act, which the Republican leader seeks to have passed before the midterm elections in November. Trump, during a roundtable event in Tennessee, urged Republican lawmakers to work through the upcoming Easter holiday in order to push through the voter ID bill. In his remarks, the American president urged his party leaders to make this one for Jesus.
So I'm tying Homeland Security into voter identification with picture and proof of citizenship in order to vote. And those two items are the most important thing having to do with Homeland Security. So it should be part of the Homeland Security bill. And I'm requesting that the Republican senators do that immediately. You don't have to take a fast vote. Don't worry about Easter going home. In fact, make this one for Jesus, okay? Make this one for Jesus. That's what I tell them. It would be a damn good thing.
Congress will shut down for Easter break, which will be 2 weeks long, beginning at the end of this week. There is another key gathering of the Republican conservatives scheduled from Wednesday in Texas. Conservative Political Action Conference will last for 4 days, with the U.S. president expected to address the gathering on the 28th of March, which is the final day. While many top lawmakers and influential conservative voices are expected to attend, the agenda remains unclear as shadows of the Iran war, global economic crisis, and fallout from the Epstein files loom large. The ripple effect of the war in West Asia is being felt across the globe. America and Israel's war against Iran has sparked a major debate on energy security in Asian countries. New Delhi has been making efforts to overcome the dwindling oil and natural gas supplies through the Strait of Hormuz. The government has called an all-party meet on the 25th of March to discuss the ongoing situation. India, remember, imports a major share of its oil and natural gas needs. Almost one-third of India's total oil imports normally pass through the Strait of Hormuz. The waterway has now turned into a war zone. Some Indian ships have passed through the strait, but the number is nowhere near to the pre-war flow of oil and natural gas supplies. Prime Minister Narendra Modi briefed the Parliament today on the efforts made by his government to minimize the impact of the war on Indians. However, he said that the war will have a grave impact.
भारत का प्रयास है कि तेल हो, गैस हो, फर्टिलाइजर हो, ऐसे हर जरूरी सामान से जुड़े जहाज भारत तक सुरक्षित पहुंचे। लेकिन इस युद्ध से बनी वैश्विक परिस्थितियां अगर लंबे समय तक बनी रहती है तो गंभीर दुष्परिणाम तय है।
On the other hand, the Indian Prime Minister assured the country once again that India holds enough oil and natural gas reserves to mitigate the crisis. The Prime Minister's assurance could not convince the opposition. The leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, Rahul Gandhi, has said that Prime Minister Modi has made a structural blunder and he cannot be trusted to ensure India's energy security.
देखिए, ठीक है, ऑल पार्टी मीटिंग बुलाई है, डिबेट होना चाहिए, बट आपने स्ट्रक्चरल गलती कर दी है, आपने पूरा ढांचा उड़ा दिया है। ठीक है, अब उसको आप ठीक नहीं कर सकते हैं, उसको ठीक करने में बहुत टाइम लगेगा और प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी तो कर ही नहीं सकते।
India is beginning to feel the direct economic heat of the Iran war. From flight tickets to air conditioners, cars to kitchen essential, prices are already moving up and more hikes are on the way. So what's getting expensive, by how much and why? Here's a detailed breakdown. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. As always, we'll keep getting you analysis from across the world. For now, thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Campaigns, elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Beyond the noise and rhetoric, no election, no ballot issue too small. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. More than just headlines. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power, only on WION. World is one.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world.